Hey there, I thought I would make an episode. I was having a ton of fun playing lately and realized it's kind of been a while since last episode, and there's a lot to cover. It's a lot of good. This season's been quite a fun couple months so far. We have a dynamite team this season, as you see by our 22-3 record. We started the season 2-2 when we were missing 5 guys in NHL camp. Started the season's first couple games without. We didn't have Bailey, he was in the camp. We didn't have Lundy, he was in camp. We didn't have Widmer, he was in Maple Leafs camp. We didn't have Pariza, he was in Calgary's camp. And we didn't have, I think there was one more. Oh, Gouds was in camp. So, and Parrish was in camp. So I think there's 5 or 6 guys missing at the start of the season. Our entire second line was missing. So it was it was crazy. Maynard started the season as our a guy playing up on the second line there, getting a ton of minutes. But yeah, so the top defensemen are missing. So what happened is we ended up going 2-2, and then we pretty much started dominating after that. So we were 2-2 going into October 1st, and as you can see on this screen, this was one of the most dominant months I've ever seen. We had 0 games within a goal. The closest game was a 2-goal game here, 3-1 victory, and a 4-1. Every other game, as you see, was at least 3 goals difference. We had 12, 10, and 10, and 9. So a run of 4 games there where we were at double-digit goals, pretty much, except for that 9 there. And so as that month happened, you can see we beat teams from all over the place. We had a couple of Western Conference teams there. We beat Saginaw, Sault Ste. Marie. It's actually all Western teams pretty much. Owen Sound, Windsor. So we had a big road trip and just wrecked the West Coast teams. And then came back to the East Coast, and we only lost. We only lost 1 game that month. We just lost to Flint, so we've just been dominating. So we had like a big time win streak because obviously we're what are we 20-1 since that original start. So that's pretty crazy. We pretty much won every game, and so yeah, we're in December now. We just finishing up November here, and I haven't even looked at this one yet. We just won 7-1 again. McDonald had 3 more goals. So that's the next thing I'll definitely talk about. Wow, this guy sure had quite the period there when it comes to penalties. Jeez. McDonald just with a monster game. So this is about the 3rd time already this season in like 25 games, 26 games that McDonald has had a hat trick and a fight in the same game. And it's just getting. He had another fight. He had another penalty. So let's look at this freaking box score. This is hilarious. So hat trick, 10 shots on net, 14 penalty minutes, 2 fights, 2 minors, 4 hits, and he had a takeaway. And he had a +2 rating. Just hilarious, absolutely hilarious box scores he's been having this season. So yeah, he's kind of the main focus of this episode. Is Peterson's just pretty much as crazy too. He's got 48 points in 25 games, so he's at a 2-point per game clip. So in a 60, he's say he plays 65 games or whatever, he's on pace for pretty much 110, 120 type points if he keeps it up, which is almost halfway through the season. Like, it's not that crazy. It's not like just a hot start in 5 or 7 games. Like, once you play 26 games, that's pretty much the sample size big enough if they've been healthy to kind of extrapolate over the season. So there's a good chance he ends up over 100 points. And if he does that, he's well on pace to break the all-time Barrie Colts scoring record because Brenneman has it, I think. Yeah, Brenneman has it with, what was it, 370 maybe? Or sorry, is it just 270? But yeah, so Brenneman started with 65 or 68 points his 6-year-old year, so Peterson had like a +10 on him already. But Brenneman's second year, he got 107, so they're pretty equal after 2 years. Brenneman's third year, I think he went back down to about 90 or something, because he didn't have 300 straight point seasons. I think he had 107 as a 17-year-old, and then as an 18-year-old, he went down to somewhere in the 90s, and then as a 19-year-old, he jumped back up to like 110. He had 114 points, I think, that last year, because I remember he had something crazy like 50 goals and 64 assists or something. So Peterson here is pretty close pace-wise to that. So we should finish right around where Brenneman's at. So I'll be really interesting to keep an eye on. Peterson has a little bit better team around him, and when I say a little, I mean a lot, because these teams this year and next year are going to be really good. Like that last year's team won the Memorial, and this team might be better. Swittenack is subbing in right now for a 12-rated Baldoni with an injury, so our entire defense is double digits. We got the stud steady Bailey as the number one LD here. He's got stay-at-home ratings really high, and then we have the big-time shot out of Sanger, the overager, who's got crazy production this season. And then we have a 20-year-old OA we signed from Sudbury. He's a 3 or 4 year player in Sudbury, really steady player, and he was overager there and hasn't been drafted, so he was probably the best overager left that was undrafted. Because that's why I try to stick by that rule. Is I don't want to have OAs or NHL draft picks, even though it does happen in real life sometimes. The guys that are like 5th to 7th round picks don't sign after the 2 years when they're 17 and 19, and then technically they're not owned by the NHL team anymore. So a lot of them do return as 20-year-olds. Some guys get redrafted when they're 19 or 20 or whatever. But so yeah, that does happen. But I just wanted to stick with that rule, so it's not an excuse to get too good at teams or whatever. So anyways, he was the best available guy that was undrafted that I saw, so I picked him up, and he's a 15 rated, which is crazy. It's one of the better OAs I've ever had, ratings wise. And then we got the first round pick rookie here playing a bunch of minutes. We'll talk about him in a few minutes. But he's subbing in for Baldoni, the really good 18-year-old. And then we got the other really good 18-year-old, Lundy. And it's funny you see him on the third line, but I'm just playing my lines equally, so it doesn't really matter. The top line has the overager and the 19-year-old stud on it. And then I wanted to put Lundy as the third line because I wanted to pair him up with a big defensive guy, because Lundy's a very offensive player. And I figured Sluzar was too good not to have on the top 4 pairing, so I wanted to put his kind of more of a two-way guy. And Baldoni was a defensive guy, so it's just the way it worked. Lundy actually, at the start of the season, looked to be my number 1 D-man, and then kind of get shafted that third line. But like I said, it doesn't matter because they're all getting pretty equal minutes. It's very balanced defense core. It's not top-heavy at all. You could argue the third line might be the best pairing just based off how well they work off each other, because Lundy's got such a big shot and such a good offensive read and a really good offensive player and skater. And then you got Kakik, who's like 6'8", 240, just a monster punishing defenseman. So if you look, Kakik actually leads the league in plus minus. He's at a plus 37 in 25 games, and Lundy's second on the team with a plus 33, I think. So it's that third line is actually kind of my most productive. So it's just, as you can see, it's a really good balance. That 3 overage defensemen, actually. All 3 OA spots are on defense. We got Sanger, the 20-year-old, and Bailey's the 19-year-old, and we got the 20-year-old here, and then we got the Kakix, the other 20-year-old. So each pairing has no A on it, and then we got the 19-year-old, and then Lundy's 18, and then the normal starter here, Baldoni's 18. So we do have a very solid defense core this season. It's probably the most balanced. Probably the best third line defense pairing I've ever had. So we won't even have to really change those minutes for the playoffs. Might jack up that first line just a bit because that Bailey and Sanger combo is nasty. But like I said, so are the other ones. So I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, I don't really want to take away minutes from that third line. We'll see. But if you look at the forwards here, we'll go back to McDonald because we said we were going to talk about him quite a bit. McDonald's having pretty much the best season I've ever seen in my life in this game so far. I was trying to think the most productive point seasons in OHL history, and it's not to be unfair to the older guys. I know the game changes or whatever, but just my era where I started following how I know the game, I kind of go back to about the 2000 time. So I've tried to think in like the 20 and I guess 30 years in this game, but 20 in real life. I don't remember any really better seasons than like 120, 130 points, I guess. I know Corey Perry was around there, that dominant London Knights team. Sidney Crosby was up at like 160 in the queue and stuff, but maybe even 170. But I think from a stat standpoint in this game, this is the best I've ever seen. Mitch McDonald has 39 goals in 25 games. He has 56 points, so he's well over 2 points a game at 56, and he's leading the league in penalty minutes, which is hilarious because his fights. If you look at his advanced stats. He was in 48 fights last year, and he won 31 of them. And it's really interesting because he did play a full season that year, so he's 16-5. So I guess his aggressiveness never really changed much, so I don't know what the cause of that was. If it was just his fighting rating going up and him playing more, he was in a lot more fights. But it's really interesting because he always had that 17-18 aggression. His fighting at 14, though, as a rookie, was like, I think 8 or 9. That just kind of kept going up. And Yeah, it's just crazy, just like the rest of his skills. His defense has kind of peaked. I don't think his defense or even positioning have changed in a year now or so. The offense was going up like crazy. The skating kept going up like crazy, and it seems like he's finally kind of like gotten close to his peak because he doesn't really go up that much anymore. It literally was insane. He was going up like +1 in 4 different categories every single month in monthly progressions, and no one else really ever goes up more than 1 or 2 categories. And he went up all 4 like every month for 2 years. But he finally peaked out and started going like back to normal like everybody else and just going up. Like last month it was just +1 speed and that's it. So he's finally looking like but it doesn't matter because he's like the best player in the league. He's got absolutely insane stats. He's pretty much the fastest skater in the league, I think. One of the faster guys. There's probably a few guys at like 15, 16 speed with a little higher acceleration, but be in that top 10 for speed. Probably the best stats when it comes to the combination between screening, getting open, and shot. Actually, the 3 sniper ratings. Saying offensive reads is pretty much there too. So pretty much all the stuff that he's like an insane finisher, goal scorer, which is why I turned his shooting way up. He's still a good offensive read and passer. He's like a balanced guy, but his shooting is so elite, probably the best in the league, that you just got to have him in junior hockey. A guy that has an NHL shot like that, you have to have him shooting a shitload. So he's a guy I thought would be around 30 to 35 goals. Last year's at 31, so I was thinking he'd be like 35, 40. And then maybe if he had a really good team, he'd be closer to 50. But he's absolutely blowing by that, and he's on pace for 90 goals. Because I think 25 games. So if you double that, almost triple it, because 25, 50, 75, 68 games this season. He's suspended the 1 game. But yeah, so he's on pace for just a ridiculous, like almost 100 at this point. Because I think the last few games he's had like a hat trick and 2 goals in the last 2 games. Just insane. So if you look at those last 3 games, hat trick, and then 2, and then 5, and then 2. So yeah, it's just the tear he's on, but it's ever since the start of the season. So he actually, I don't know if those are preseason games or not, but yeah, it's pretty much like a goal every game, and then he's got like 5 hat tricks. He had 4 goals in a fight that 1 game, which is hilarious. Then he had 4 points in 2 fights that game, and then he had the 2 fights and 2 minors that game, still scored a goal. Then he had a couple only quiet games this season, only 1 goal in the 3 games there. But you go right back to a fight and 2 assists in that game. This game he had 4 points, including a hat trick and a fight and minor there. Every single game too, he's gotten multiple hits. He's up to 4 hits most games. And then yeah, you get another 2-point game, and I think 2 fights probably there from the looks of it. You got 2 assists and a fight there, 2 goals and a fight there, 3 points, fight there, and then finally like stayed out of the friggin' penalty box there a little bit. Just the 1 minor, the 100-game scoring offense that game, 3 assists, and then he went right back to 2 goals again, and then he had an insane game of his career there: 7 points, 5 goals, 10 shots, a fight, 2 minors, and 4 freaking hits, and he had a takeaway. So just like probably the best game of all time. And then 7 points in a fight, like that's just, come on. And then we got 2 more goals here in a fight, and then we had 3 goals in 2 fights. So the friggin' penalties this guy is racking out. Last season he had the funny thing, he's actually lost a decent amount of fights, but he's still won a lot more than he's lost. I think he at one point is at 7-6, so he's won a bunch since then. But yeah, so he's 16-8 on fights on the season, 24 total fights, 16-1. But yeah, if you look at his stats for penalty minutes, he's at 173 already, so he's on pace for about the same as last year, maybe even a tad more. And so last year, I'm pretty sure that was pretty close to record. I think I looked up the all-time record, and it was right around that. I think like 370, 390 or something. So pretty much should have the all-time record in the OHL for penalty minutes in back-to-back seasons, assuming he's going to be around 400 this year again. And he might lead the league in scoring. If you look at the league leaders, it's not even close. He's got 39 goals, and only one other player has over 18. So, and that's the only guy with a chance in hell of catching him is this big beast on Saginaw, whose ratings aren't anywhere close to that. He's probably just on a decent team. If you look at that team, he's probably just got like a good center or something. That's weird, yeah. Could just be my scout doesn't think very highly of him, but yeah, so if you look there, it's like that guy doesn't really have a chance to catch him, I don't think. That's just like a pretty average team, but for whatever reason, that guy's kind of having a big time year. That 6'5" guy, where'd he go? This guy here, yeah, so he's just, yeah, he had a pretty good year last year as a young guy, 26 goals. And he's a guy that was a 7th round pick, which is kind of cool. But yeah, so he's, like I said, I don't really think he has much of a chance to catch McDowell, though. But McDonald has 39 points, 56 total points, sorry. And that's 2, 3, and 4 all Barrie Colts. So the closest guy from 56 on another team to him is 36. So McDonald is just historically dominant this season. He's got 134 shots, showing he's shooting quite a bit and a really good offensive team. And then we got, again, Barrie Colts at 3 and 4. I purposely separated Widmer. I had Widmer on that same line with McDonald and Peterson, which would have been insane, the point-wise. But I wanted to turn Widmer's shooting up, and I did want to have 3 guys on the same line with high shooting. And because we had Senger as the number 1 D man on kind of most of the time with McDowell there, their shots were both way up, so I didn't want to have that third guy. So I put Widmer on the third line by himself, kind of, because he's good enough. I think he can single-handedly kind of carry a line by himself, which he's proven this season. So if you look at the lines, he's on that third line left wing, and he's got a really good offensive center with him, Fournier. He's kind of like 12, 13, 14 rated in all the offensive stuff and like 10 rated in all the D stuff. So I figured that he'd be good to pair with Widmer because good setup and offensive man. Then Widmer kind of makes up for Fournier's average defense because Widmer's an elite defender. And then they teamed him up with a really good 17-year-old. My best 17-year-old, he's a really good two-way defensive player. So that was kind of the thinking there. Gods is really good setup man, but he's also a sick agitator, so I thought it'd be really good to set him to agitator, be a defensive role, and then have Pariza as the big-time setup man. But Gouds is also a fantastic passer and offensive read, so it's a really nice combination, I think, having the ultimate setup man there, like 16 passing, and Gods is really good passing, and then having a big-time finisher on that line with him, a 6'6", 220 beast in Parrish. And then that's why I like that. And then I had that first line there, we got the big 2, and then we just paired Daly up with him because he's a good energy guy that can back check a little bit and forecheck and just play a little bit of an energy checking role, and let the 2 big offensive powerhouses do their job there, the 17 and 20 rated beasts. So, and then, yeah, we got the big-time point shooter, Senger, so he's shooting a lot from the point there. And Senger, I'll show you his stats a little bit. He's a big-time player, too. He's got the crazy shot with 14 shooting actually in range, and he's got 6-34 this season for 40 points as a defenseman in 25 games. So that's pretty insane, too. That's one of the best defensive statistical seasons I've seen. So these guys are all on pace for very historical years. I think this is a really special team. We won the Memorial last year, and this team looks even better. The last thing I'll show you here is if you look at the points for and against, no one's even close to us in goals. It's just insane. There's like 3 other teams that are 100, and then the 115, which is a really good Mississauga team. So it looks like from the goals for and against, they might be second best team in the league next to me. Although I think this London team is probably maybe a little better from the stats wise, but yeah, they're on a big tear lately. Though they got the best player in the league, that crazy defenseman I was really looking to trade for. Where'd he go here? Is he injured? Dudek, yeah. How long's he out for? Just day to day. Yeah, Dudek's absolutely insane. He's got the craziest defensive ratings ever. 19 positioning and 17 read, and 17 stick checking, 6'3", 230. Big time hitter, big time skater, big time shot, really good passing. Just an ultimate player. So he'll go extremely high in the draft. So yeah, that's the team this year, and then I guess the last thing I'll show you here is Sadko is having nuts year too. This whole team, it's just been like the perfect year. It's almost too good to be true. It's probably going to, luck never stays good for too long. So I'm sure we'll have some bumps and bruises over the next few months. I imagine we'll have, probably some injuries or whatever happen. But because right now the season's just going perfectly. Sadko has a 15-1 record, 2 shutouts, out 910 save percentage, and has a 1.8 goals against average because we have such a fantastic offense and overall team. We're just outscoring the shit out of people, and he's not letting up much either. So that's pretty crazy season. So I think the next big move is we're going to go completely all in on this year next. So I'm not too worried about the 16-year-old because by the time he's good, he's more of a late bloomer. He had really high potential and low current when I drafted him. There's a few guys that were a lot better current players, but I really like this guy's long-term potential. 6'2", 170 with big-time 13 speed and fantastic ratings across the board. Good mentals. But I think he's very valuable in a trade because in real life, those first-round picks you can get a lot back. That's pretty elite players you get in that first round. So I think to do a really fun, realistic trade, I'm going to trade him for a big-time 19-year-old or 18-year-old just so I can go completely all in this year and have like a historically great team and hopefully win the Memorial. Again, which will be back-to-back years. Because if you trade a first round pick rookie, that's really good, a nice 6'2" defenseman with big time potential, to a rebuilding team, along with a couple seconds and third round picks, you're going to get a lot back. Because in real life, that's how the big time trades happen. The one I'm kind of specifically thinking of is the Oshawa Niagara trade. Oshawa had two really good players, an overager in Brassard, I think it was, who was like a 6'3", 215-pound defenseman. And he was a really good, like, 4 or 5 year player in the OHL. So they trade him and their captain, Jack Studnicka, who's 6'2", NHL second or third round pick, I think. He's an NHL guy that was like a 30 goal scorer on Oshawa's 17, 18-year-old or whatever. And so that was a big time trade. An elite 19-year-old goal scoring center and nice overage big defenseman. So they trade those two to to Niagara. And in return, they got the first round pick. I think he was like 12th overall or something, Leighton Moore. He's a really good defenseman. He was Jamie Drysdale's teammate, I think, in minor midget on Toronto. And he was like, or I could be wrong on that, but he's like 5'8", but he was like a fantastic offensive defenseman. So he was a top pick in the OHL draft. So that was the return on that. They got him and a couple draft picks, and so so I was kind of trying to think of something like that where it'd be really similar, like a first round pick defenseman and a few draft picks for like an elite 19-year-old scorer. So the guy I really had my eye on was the Sault Ste. Marie is in last place, just getting absolutely destroyed this year. They have 4 wins, so Niagara's the only team even close to being that bad, and they also have an elite 19-year-old. So this is another guy I think would be cool to trade for, because in real life, there's no way he would probably finish the year on a 6-20 team as like a top 3 player in the league, arguably as good as anyone. I think Widmer's almost as good, and the guy I'll show you is pretty close. But this guy is big time NHL draft pick, Vancouver, I think, in the second round. Yeah, so he was an all-star guy last season with 51 points. Really? He was an all-star last season, was it? Yeah, that's interesting. It just shows how good he is on a pretty bad team, it looks like. So he was a minus 18. But yeah, so he would be a guy to trade for. I'd have to give up my rookie first round pick defenseman, probably like 2 second round picks and 2 third round picks or something. And then the other guy I really wanted to look at trade for would be this. I guess he's injured right now. I really like this guy too. Nice 19-year-old fourth liner with really high defense. Or he'd be a shutdown defensive guy. 6'1", 16 defense or 13 skating. Average offense, even slightly above for this level, but he's definitely like a defensive shutdown guy with a positioning defense read being so high. So he's a guy I think I would just, on a really dominant first place team, he's like the perfect third, fourth liner. Just be a shutdown defensive guy. Even though I have pretty good third, fourth lines, if when you have a team this good, you just want him, might as well go all in and get like the best team you kind of can. Because if you're going to play a team and you don't want to lose like game 6 or 7 in the NHL finals, when you think you could have made a little minor upgrades here and there. So he's a guy you'd probably be able to get pretty easily too. He's just like a third, fourth line guy. He only had 22 points as 44 games as a 18-year-old last year, and he's playing a bigger role this year, but more of like a guy that you'd probably be able to get for just like maybe a couple thirds or something. Maybe a decent young 17-year-old that's like pretty decent, and like maybe a third and a fourth, or like would probably fetch something like that, because he's on a 19-year-old last place team. They'd be shipping out guys like that for sure. They have this goalie who was the first pick of the draft a couple years ago, but they'll keep him around. He's only 18, so he has a year or so left. But yeah, that seems terrible getting shit pumped there. They got the one good lefty. I'll take a peek at him. Was that Garrett? Yeah, it must be. So yeah, he's a 19-year-old. So that's another guy I would probably consider if I was didn't have a guy just like him. But I have really good D, so I don't really need him. But yeah, the guy I want to talk to you about, sorry to blabber there, was Chong. He's their captain. He was the first pick of the draft for Sault Ste. Marie out of the priority draft there. And then he went 21st in the NHL draft. And he was a World Junior gold medalist last year. So he has a big-time resume. He has 4 gold medals with Canada. He has the Helsinki, and then the under-17, the under-18, and he won the World Juniors last year. So that's pretty insane resume there. And he's a point-a-game guy this year for the last place team. And he just had major injuries, out 2 to 3 more months. So he's pretty much going to miss like the whole season. Just play a little bit of February probably in March. So he's a guy like absolutely insanely like 100% they would trade, because he's top 10 player in the league. And he's on the last place team. That's one of the worst teams in the last like decade. So he would be a guy that would fetch them a big time return. So with him, I was thinking, if I actually plugged in the trade thing, I was thinking if you look at my picks, I would probably trade my first round right D rookie, which would be sick for them because they're terrible. So they definitely take a first round pick rookie defenseman. I don't have a second this year, but I've tried to accumulate a lot of mid round picks here. So I grabbed a couple extra fourths in trades a couple years ago because this is the year I had to replace all my guys because I have like all 18-year-olds, a shitload. So I figured this year I'll draft them and then play 2 16-year-olds again next year on the really good team, like the rule says or whatever. And then the year after that, all these mid round picks probably play as 17-year-olds to replace all the guys I'll lose because I'll lose like 15, 20 guys that year, all starters. So that was the plan there. I just tried to pick up a shitload of extra. I think I had a big trade with Sarnia. Yeah, I picked up like a 5th, a 7th, and a 10th or something. So as you can see, a lot of those picks are Sarnias. But so yeah, if I was going to trade for a guy, I don't have a second this year, but I do have a third. And then I could toss in the second and a couple thirds next year. I tried to, again, I haven't really had good enough players to ship out to get like second round picks, but I shipped out a lot of like kind of average guys that were like fourth line guys type guys for me, and then have spots for them because I've been so deep. But I knew it would be second, third line guys for other teams and stuff, so I got a couple extra thirds for guys like that. And then I also have a second extra I picked up from my goalie. I traded my really good 19-year-old goalie because I had the other guy, and then the Reese guy wasn't performing great. But like we talked about in the other episode, Reese was a really solid player. I traded Ottawa for a second 2 years down the road because he's pretty much their best player. I thought it was a pretty fair trade. Reese is, if you sort by abilities, their second or third best player here, and be their starting goalie that could probably start like 50 games. He's a guy that has 50 wins in the OHL under his belt. So really solid guy, like a 19-year-old that was a former top 5 pick, has a Memorial Cup, has 50 wins in the OHL. Just a nice guy to kind of come in and solidify that team because I know they're still bad, but they were like really bad last year. So then they would have just got absolutely destroyed again if they didn't get him because they would have had an even worse goalie here. So I figured it would be nice to do that trade because that is a realistic trade. You get a really solid 19-year-old goalie with 50 wins under his belt, like I said. Top 5 pick, that guy would be able to fetch you a second or third 3 years down the line. So I just got that 1 second and I think a third for him, which I thought was fair. I kind of was hoping he just never seemed to play as good as the stats said, like 5-star potential, and that's the other thing. He's an NHL draft pick, so it's like they wouldn't want him to sit there and only start 15, 20 games for me again. That was a team that he's on Calgary. I guess they traded him to Detroit actually, but yeah, he was a second round NHL pick who looks like kind of a bust. But I mean, if you're a second round NHL pick, teams in the OHL aren't going to give up on you. You still have a ton of talent. So, yeah, I like that trade. I think if you had asked me like 3 years ago, I probably wouldn't have done that blockbuster I did. I thought he was going to be a superstar. I gave up shitload for him. I gave up Giancarlo, who's my best defenseman at the time. Zakhoff was like my second best forward at the time, and my stud goalie. They were all older guys when I was kind of rebuilding. It was the one time I kind of rebuilt. And so I got him and another nice young goalie. Or I don't remember this guy actually. Just a filler, I guess. But yeah, so that was the big trade for that. And he went there and at least hopefully makes them close to a 500 team. But that's how I got that extra second round pick. So we have 2 second round picks in 2 years, and then we have 1 next year and 0 this year. So we have 3 in the next 3 years. So I think we could probably, you'd argue that you'd probably have to give up all 3 if you're going to get this guy. Is like, because there would be a mega bidding war for this guy. He's going to miss the whole season, but he'll be back for the March and playoffs, which is all that really matters. If you're like a first place team, you're going to for sure make the playoffs. So he's a guy I think in real life it would be a major bidding war for a rental on him, half season rental, and first round NHL talent. Is that if you bring in an extra, if you're already a good team and you bring in a guy that's like a first round NHL pick, that's pretty big time. So that's like that's a guy that his offense isn't but 19 screening is just so insane. It makes his power forward rating so high, and his grinder rating, his agitator rating are so high too because he's aggressive. So yeah, he's a guy that's just a really tough, physical, really strong and good fighting, just really good at everything. Like if you look at that thing, it's like literally all greens. And the stuff that's yellow doesn't really matter. Shooting range is like a defenseman rating, and shot blocking doesn't really matter that much, and face-off's a center thing. So if you look at it, like literally he's green in everything that he does. So he's a guy that would come in and be like a top 2 player in your team, just be a beast. So I think if you paired him, the thing is he's a left shot, so you could put him on the left wing in that first line with Peterson McDowell as like the tough guy. That line would be as good as you could pretty much possibly have in junior hockey. That'd be like an 18, 19, and 20 rated line. So that would just be nuts. Or you could say that line's already dominant. McDowell's already like just having a historical year, so you don't really want to mess with that leave Daly on that first line, who's got some pretty good ratings, and you could put that guy on like the second line. I think would probably be the best fit. Chong with Parise and Parrish. So you'd have 19 rated 16 on that line together. The Gretzky's office passing center with a really good all-around guy, and then you'd have Parrish, a good finisher, and then you can move Gods down to 14 rated all the way to the third or fourth line and have him as an agitator to shut down defensive role. He's also a really good passer, so I'd probably actually move him to the third line, move Maynard down, maybe bench one of these guys, but I'm sure there'll be an injury anyway, so it doesn't really matter. That's the other thing is like you're always going to have injuries, so I'm sure everyone will get playing time, but I think that's a trade we'll go for. The only other one I thought of was maybe trading for an 18-year-old, since we'll be such a good team next year. It'd be really cool to have a guy. Because I'll pretty much, if I'm going to get like that one superstar player, I'll have to give up like all my assets, like all 3 of those second-round picks probably will have to go. Because I don't think it'd be fair to only send 1 or 2. Because if you look at all those big trades in real life, the teams will get like 4 second-round picks for like a stud 18-year-old center and like a good round rookie. So I think to get Chong or the next guy I talk about, you'd have to give up that. If you look at this guy Camp here, he's only 18, so he's not quite as good, but he's pretty damn close. But he'd be back for next year on another dominant team with McDonald and Peterson returning, and pretty much all the forwards are back except for one. So it's like, yeah, next year's team will be insane too. So I think you gotta maybe go for this guy instead, just the fact he'll be back next year. Even though I think there's more of a chance that Hamilton would hold on to him if he was back next year, because if you look, they are pretty old. They have a lot of good 19-year-olds at the top here, but yeah, it's hard to say. I think next year they'll have this really good center back, so they would have in that left winger to pair together to have 2 really good 19-year-old forwards at next year. And then they would have this really good left D, and then they have this really good young 5-star potential D. So they'd probably have a pretty solid team next year. Depending on if they got this goalie back as an overager, they'd have a solid 20-year-old goalie. So I think maybe they would kind of not make that trade if they didn't have to, based on the fact that that guy would be back next year and probably be their best player. So, and they were maybe going to compete next year. I don't know if they do a full rebuild with that much talent. I know that's not a ton, but it is a really good center, and that's really important in junior hockey. So if you had a really good center, yeah, you might not want to give up on that year. They also could have a couple good OAs. Like this guy might be back and be one of the best OAs in the year of the season. Oh no, he's an NHL pick, but yeah. So we'll see. I think that Sault Ste. Marie trade is more realistic because that guy would be on the move for sure, and he'd probably want to go to the 22-3 team, and that'd probably be a trade. Sault Ste. Marie is so bad. So if they got that young right D, and then they paired him with this guy who was like a top 5 pick, 9th pick of the draft, they'd have the 2 first-round guys together, 16 years old, and they have the guy that was this goalie back. And then they have this other really good center who's a 3.5-star potential 17-year-old, 6'4" with good speed, good defense rating. So this guy's a really nice center. So yeah, I think definitely that they do a rebuild. So I'll probably make that trade in January right before the trade deadline because there's no rush on it because that guy's injured anyways. So I might as well wait. That would give him more time to kind of assess my right D because they wouldn't rush for that trade. They would definitely wait till the deadline. And then you can't, in real life, you can't trade first-round pick rookies until the January window anyway. It's just a 20-day window from January 1st to 20th, I think. Or January 1st to January 10th, I guess. And then you can trade guys. So they would wait. Might as well just keep my thing with being realistic as possible and wait till that January deadline over a month from now and make that trade. So I'll give up 3 second-round picks in that guy and then maybe even a 3rd-round pick. Make a blockbuster trade. That's probably the most I've ever gotten off a trade to get this Chonga. That'll be crazy. So it'll be really exciting to see what he can do in the playoffs once we pull that trade off. Anyways, that's it for this episode. Became a long one, but there was lots to talk about. It was fun. So we'll see you guys probably around the trade deadline. We'll probably make another episode or something when we make that trade, or maybe in February. We'll see.